Alright. Howdy, chat. Can I hear myself? There's the dumbass. Alright, well. Shut the fuck up. Alright, so, welcome to the third book club, and we only have 3 people here, so we're making good on this series, huh? To be fair, I didn't give anyone a vote on this one, because, I really wanted you all to get into... Well, first off, I'm going back and listening through all of Youjo Senki myself, and I wanted to, sort of read it. Dumbass. Well, if the shoe fits, dude, come on now. Anyways, Dr. Love, you didn't listen to the last hour of it? You didn't? You all are still doing family things? Nah. I don't know how many people really do New Year's Day things, but sure. Anyways, but, yeah, you didn't listen to the last hour of it? You missed a lot, dude. Like, the ending to the light novel is basically setting up, like, what Tanya's battalion is going to be doing for the rest of the series. Watched the anime and read the book a while ago, remember most of it, okay. Okay. But anyways, so volume 1, alright, let me think. I'm tired as shit. I took a nap with a fever earlier, and I had like one of those really realistic dreams that like fucks with your head whenever you wake up, so I'm a bit out of it, my bad. Damn, it's a blowout for Stalker, huh? Come on, y'all, vote in the, make sure you vote in the, poll for Stalker or Roadside Picnic. Anyways, but before we begin talking about the book club, let me just say, that Isekai book was one that I bought, like, around last summer. I bought it at the same time as the Space Mercenary one. So, you can tell why I didn't pick it up for a few months, because the Space Mercenary one was dog shit. So I held off on getting the next one, which was I Am the Evil Lord of a Galactic Empire. Something like that. So I thought it was Overlord in space. I was wrong. It has some of that in it, but at the same time, I did not expect the ending to I have no mouth and I must scream, but with rape. I was not expecting that. Thank you, Raw. Yeah. So someday, maybe the book club after next, I will force you all to fucking read that Isekai. I know you guys might be like, dude, the last Space Isekai you had was fucking dog shit. This one, not terrible. I'll say there's a few problems I have with it. I might make a video on it, to be fair. Maybe, I don't know. I think I'm going to give up on all this shit. I want to get back to writing. But while we're here, for now, alright? We're going to be talking about fucking Volume 1 of Youjo Senki. Now, it's no big surprise that I fucking love Youjo Senki. It is one of my favorite things of all time. The light novel, at least. Now, you can make all the cunny jokes and bullshit that you want. But to me, Youjo Senki is like the perfect balance of my love for anime bitches, my love for like anime girls, you know. You have Serebrikov. I like yes, I do like Mary Sue. A lot of you will probably cringe at that, but I do like Mary Sue. I think she's really well done in the book. I like history. I like history. I like mechanics. I like the world building is really good. We'll get into the world building again and how there's a lot to read into how the magic system works in Youjo Senki, but we'll get into that. I like, of course, military, right? I like military history, and I like how realistic it is. I said it many times before, but I said it like every time I bring up Youjo Senki. When people ask me to describe what is the light novel like, I always tell them, look, the light novel is unlike the manga or the anime at all. The light novel, at points, is pretty much just a war memoir, where, like, there could be entire chapters where the entire chapter is literally them discussing strategy, and that's it. Or, you know, people smoking in a back room while discussing how the war's going, and that's an entire chapter. And it's peak, honestly. It's really good. You really care about the characters they introduce, right? Yeah, there are parts in Tanya where I cringe due to the whole I'm so powerful, but it pulled me back where it world builds or the whole military thing. Now, that only does in the first volume. The first volume is very typical isekai. Very typical isekai stuff. But, like, oh, she's like the most strongest and shit. As the light novel goes on, Tanya gets pushed more and more to the back, right? It's not like she's like no longer the main character, but the war becomes more than about just her. Eventually, the war just is everyone. And at that point, Tanya literally is, yes, she's a remarkable soldier, and her battalion does have an impact on whatever battlefield they find themselves on, but at the same time, she herself will not be able to win the war alone. And that is the message. Oh god, am I late? Only by about 8 minutes. You're good, you're good. It's technically only 4 minutes since I've been listening to music for a while. But, really, the fucking, the whole point of the light novel is that Tanya will not be able to win this war by herself, and, you know, around volume 8 or volume 9, it goes from how do we win the war to, okay, how do some of us get out of here without being hung? Right? Favorite part is when the Empire realizes there's going to be a world war and the journal is like, ah, shit. Yeah. So, let's talk about only volume 1 for right now, though. Let's start off with, of course, the beginning of the book. The beginning is let me go get my physical copy real good. That way I can, like, get direct quotes for you all. Give me a sec. Fun thing about this physical copy that I have, it is stuffed to the brim with pages of notes that I've not written into the book itself, but I've written on other pages, tore out, and put into the book, where I have notes where I've been looking through this. Let's talk about how Tanya's okay. Dr. Love, you make me sad. So, we'll go and, let's start off with the first fucking part, where the first words, are quite literally, you know, telling you the irony of the book, where, you know, as Tanya's being born, the first words in the book are, in the beginning there is only light. And you get that feeling of, you know, Tanya being born and not understanding it, as well as with the, you know, main character. Like, you hear the descriptions of it, you know, there's a warmth and a vague restlessness, provoking a desire to lose oneself. Talking about the womb, you know, and it describes Tanya's body as it. It suddenly began shivering. Its mind registered the cold. You know, at the same time, it began writhing in distress. You don't get it in the audiobook, but it's very good. Oh yeah, listen to the audiobook. There is not much fucking god like the manga or anime in it. Yeah. I'll talk about that here in a sec. And we'll talk about that here in a sec, okay? But in the beginning, you know, you have Tanya, you know, waking up in her new body, or the businessman waking up in his new body. And as it describes that, you know, the realization that, you know, the businessman realizing that now he is Tanya, he's been reborn in an infant's body, it all of a sudden very suddenly switches to describing the Stanford prison experiment. And this is one of the only books that has the balls to fucking, it has the balls to say, and I quote, "To put it in extreme terms, the results indicated that anyone could have worked as a guard at Auschwitz, regardless of their individual disposition or moral character," in reference to the Stanford prison experiments. Wait, I didn't get a notification from the Discord. Are you even in the Discord anymore? No. Maybe? I don't know. Probably not. No, it doesn't look like you are. I think I kicked you for being annoying, maybe. But a lot of people are looking at the Stanford prison experiment and they won't apply it into how would this affect me. They'll look at like, oh, humanity is so messed up, and they'll never look at like, how can this affect, how would I be in this position? A lot of people is like, no, I'd be different. No, the fuck you wouldn't. When given the right amount of power, anyone would do atrocious shit because they felt compelled to. They felt like, well, I have the power, and I've been told to do this, so I gotta do it. It's not like oh, I was just following orders. It's a, once you have the power, it's very easy to abuse that power. Not like, oh, you know, the road to hell is paved with good intention. Once you have it, you're gonna use it. You know? So that's the opening of the book, and as it goes on, you get Tanya's childhood, and then immediately, you know, goes into the backstory of the businessman and how his philosophy in life is never really expounded upon, except for only in the manga. But in the anime, it's not really expounded upon too much. Where in here, you get the businessman's entire life, and you find out this dude was fucking mentally ill. Yeah. Yeah. With the whole... The Stanford prison experiment is a realization that, you know, whenever put in a position of a master and a slave, a master will act like a master and a slave will act like a slave. And no one else has the balls to say it except for this fucking book. Ah, fuck. My tongue is dry as shit, goddamn. Everything businessman does is in pursuit of social capital. Everything he does, he views it as a interaction with a social machine, right? So if he picks up a hobby, he's like, oh, I'm going to read this book, or I'm going to go play at this golf course, or whatever. That is because he knows that it'll, you know, benefit him in the long run. Why does he eat healthy and work out? Does he care about taking care of his body? No, because it makes sure that he can work better and more efficiently. You know, why does he keep a, you know, big social circle and interact with people in a friendly manner? It's because it'll help him out in the social machine. Just think about it. How will people treat small creatures or bugs when they're in the power of a god like Andy? Yeah. One of my favorite things about it is that Carlo Zen is definitely a learned author. He definitely knows a lot of theories. One of his was the... what theory of it? Theory of justice, I think it was. Yeah, Rawls' theory of justice. Basically, the idea of the theory is that say you are to rewrite all of society's rules from the ground up, wipe the slate completely clean, and rewrite all the rules from the ground up. Great, right? Now you don't know. What position in society will you have? Will you be at the bottom or the top? And at that point, it becomes a lot more scary. You don't want to have a very hierarchical society at that point. You want to have stability and rule of law, while also not having too strict a hierarchy in case you're on the bottom. Right? The MC more cares about the connections and how he can step up. He has friends, but it's more to seem like a normal person than a psycho that he is. Not like he's trying to hide the fact that he's a psychopath. No, it's because he has something to gain from it. That's why he makes friends. You know, the whole thing is like, I'm going to go back to the video that I made about Patrick Bateman. Patrick Bateman has friends because the two things. He wants to seem like he's hip and in, and he wants to hide the fact that he's a murderer. Businessman had a group of friends because he saw profit in them. If I go out drinking with this group that are in the human resources department for this company, then I will have a good in to this company. If I buy, this guy a birthday present, that works for another company, it'll help bring our companies together because he works in connections, right? So everything that businessman did was because there was a profit incentive. He didn't have emotions where he felt warmth. He's like, I want to do this for somebody. He's like, how can this benefit me? If I were to help this person or give this person anything right now, how would it benefit me? Really, a lot more people are this kind of HR psychopath than we could ever really know. Yeah. And it makes his position on, like, how is society going to be structured very clear, where he says as a kid he noticed something that everyone notices but they're too scared to mention, and we're going back to Carlos then being based and not being able to tell a lie, right? Something that everyone notices as a kid is that not all men are created equal. Why can the kid in front of me not do this math problem? Why are some kids faster than others? Why can't some kids shut the fuck up in class? This is something that everyone thinks of whenever they're younger, and people just try and crush it down by saying, oh, we're all made in God's image, we're all men are created equal. But you gotta realize, not all men are created equal. Nature doesn't work like that. Some men can, some men can't. And, you could call businessman a psychopath for it, but he's right. I mean, he's just right. Anyways, so after businessman grows up as Tanya, we get the backstory where Tanya is over Norden as an aerial observer. This is one thing that gets me in this part, is that Tanya can't carry a rifle at 9 years old. It's too big for her. She's also using an outdated orb type, not the... I think they had her using the Type 97. And the Type 97 or the Type 17. I think, in the anime. I know they never mentioned it by name at the time, but they used the model for it, and that irked me a lot, because I think Tanya was using a Type 13, which is a very, very basic orb. It's like the, weakest orb that the Empire had at the time. That's pedantic shit, however. Alright, but anyways, she's out there with just her radio equipment and an outdated orb, right? And she's she's doing firing missions, and she sees it as basically doing an easy job for, decent enough reward. If she does a decent job, then she can skirt her way back to the back lines pretty soon. However, she also sees it as, well, if I get stuck in Norden, this position will be shit, because Norden is known as, suffering for a lot, getting nothing in return. So... that's the successor to the 95. Nope. 97 is the weaker version of the 95. 97 is the dual core orb. 95 is the quad core orb. 97 is the rectangular one with the cross. The 95 is the round one with the cross. 95 is the one that Tanya is able to... we'll get into... I'll talk about it here in a sec, whenever we get done with this part. Anyways, so she's doing artillery, and there's a lot of different quotes in this part that are very good, such as, this is the proper way to wage war, taking organic life and rendering it past tense through the use of ammunition. I know that quote off the top of my head. It's so fucking base. I've heard it multiple times. This is the proper way to wage war, taking organic life and rendering it past tense through the use of ammunition. Though Tanya the whole time tries to do good enough to get praise, to get noticed, but not so good where she is in the front lines. Later it gets ironic. Right, Mint 95 was the one she did all the testing on. Okay, you said successor in a very weird way. Anyways. Fucking mouth is dry as shit. Sorry about that. Anyways, so so Tanya's up there, and there's a lot of exposition and monologue on how the war is going and how the war started itself. And you know that, the Empire was invaded, but the Entente Alliance did not declare war. The Empire declared war on the Entente Alliance. So the Entente Alliance violated the DMZ, and the Empire declared war over it. This will be important many volumes down the line. Volume 11 or 12, I believe. But, even though the Empire has just cause to declare war on the Entente Alliance, the fact that they declared the war itself will be used later on. However, for right now, the Empire is in the right, and the international community agrees. That the Empire agrees, but disparagingly. The Commonwealth, says that the Entente Alliance brought this upon themselves. The Federation is very upset that fighting is going on in their borders, since communists don't like destabilizing factors near their sphere. We know how the Republic thought, and that comes later, but well, fuck. My train of thought is getting so fucking... I still have a fever, to be honest. Anyways, so as for Norden goes, isn't there an implication that the Imperial intelligence was involved, or was that speculation about why there was even a soldier there to intercept the Alliance soldiers? No. The reason why the war had been going on for a few hours at that point, by the time Tanya was there, conducting the artillery observation. The intelligence was actually using Tanya as basically a long-range spotter. Trying out different spotting techniques, and Tanya did some kind of moderately illegal things before the war broke out. That's never really expounded upon on what that means. I think it was just a violation of the treaty that she was doing by doing flight intel against Norden. Maybe, we don't know, but that's all I could see them really doing. That comes up later, we'll talk about it, but no, the Imperial Army was always there on the border waiting for Norden, because for a couple days, I think a couple days or a day, the Entente Alliance had been telling, the Empire, leave this area, it's ours, we're taking over, get out, leave. So the Empire immediately started amassing soldiers on its border, like, are they not, they're not, there's no way. And that's one part, is that literally everyone's like, there's no way they're actually going to declare the war. And whenever war actually did happen, they're like, what the fuck? Or not declare war, but invade. Like, the generals, even the quote that said, like, we were so perplexed by what the Entente Alliance hoped to achieve, we actually thought that some of our generals were actually having a mutiny or a rebellion. That's fucking hilarious. Empire got invaded first, the Alliance kept sending soldiers to the border, and the Empire knew what was up. Yeah. No, the Entente Alliance didn't send soldiers to the border. They sent soldiers marching into the DMZ, the demilitarized zone. Not invading in, like, actual, like, military invasion, as a parade march. So whenever the Empire intercepted them, the Entente Alliance got fucking annihilated. It said so, in the book, where Tanya's like, these people are literally just lining up for a live fire exercise, but offering their own lives as the targets. Where she quite literally just says, they are just lining up to die. Yeah, Tanya kept mentioning that. Like that's the reason why it was so perplexing, because the entire, Imperial Army was like, there's no way that they sent, only a few dozen divisions marching in parade march into our firing lines for hours. And even Anson Sue's, like, they're literally just throwing people to die. Like, they call it, what was the quote? They called it, hiking under pressure. She mentioned it was a waste of resources and some politicians should pay for the losses, yeah. Anson Sue reveals that the soldiers were told that they were going, on a hike with some pressure, or under pressure. And that's like, man, yeah, that checks. The other thing is, moving on to the Rhine front. Tanya spends a little bit of time, the Republic invades, alright? Let me get this straight. No. Tanya, after Norden, Tanya is attacked by Anson Sue's, mage company, I think, not a battalion, I think just a company or two. Tanya ends up killing a couple of them and then self-destruct suicide bombing to kill another. This sticks with Anson Sue for a while, where he saw a child suicide bomb, but Tanya lives. She's heavily injured, but she lives. And her actions actually did save the artillery company, which earns her the Medal of White Silver, the Silver Wings Assault badge, and it gives her the title White Silver, or Argent. Right? It was a company? Yeah. Yeah. So, it was a company, alright. So, Tanya gets, a lot of accreditation. And they give her, hey, you're an outstanding mage, here's a new job in the rear. This new job in the rear is shit. She is testing out a admittedly faulty piece of equipment, which is the quad-core mage orb. To describe how magic works in this series. Alright, we're going to talk about, okay. Do any of you know, do you think she hasn't grown much because of the stress of combat / healing from the suicide bombing? It's been a lot of things. The use of magic actually does alter, like, the course of a person's life and development, where in the book, later on, you find out that heavy use of magic can either make you live to 250 to 300 years old, or will literally give you magic turbo super cancer that will literally kill you. You'll drop dead by the end of the decade if you're lucky. More God being an ass to Tanya. And also, shitty army ration diet not allowing for, proper hormones for growth. Magic works basically the same between Tanya and lyrical Nanoha. There's actually some interesting parallels between the MCs. I have no idea what that is. Anyways, so in order to explain how the magic works, is the magic the magic system is actually based off of a philosophical, a metaphysical idea of how the world works in our world. Now, this system, this metaphysical theory, has been dead for thousands of years. However, it's very interesting to talk about. Now, do you know a funny guy named Plato? Chat, do you know a funny guy named Plato? Let me tell you a little something about philosophy, alright? Plato was a student of Socrates, where Socrates didn't really expound on his own philosophy all that much. All he did is, Socrates' big contribution to philosophy was to beat the sophists. Now, I'm not going to go into everything there, but Socrates didn't really have a philosophy of his own. All he did is that he proved that it is possible to know, and that knowing matters. And then Socrates was killed. So, Plato picked up where Socrates left off, and he looked over, all the philosophies of the time, and he's like, yeah, I think I can work with this. And then he got everything wrong. Now, the big trap that Plato fell into are two things. One, he kept trying to justify his epistemology through metaphysics. That's not how that works. Right? That's not how that works. In philosophy, there is a pyramid. The bottom of the pyramid is the most base of the philosophy that you have. Everything from the bottom influences everything above, not down. At the top, you have aesthetics, the smallest form of philosophy that isn't really all that important. Basically, like what is beautiful, what is art, that kind of shit. Just below it, you have politics, which is the study of man in a social system, like politics, right? Again, this is very up high. It's a very politics should not be the number one thing that influences your morality, your philosophy. If your philosophy is only politics, you have bad philosophy, because everything else beneath it, there's nothing there. There's nothing there, and without anything there, you will fall apart instantly. You need that solid base, right? Just below that, you have ethics. Ethics and politics are not the same. Politics, the interaction of humans in regards to a social system, such as politics, governance, capitalism, communism, all that. Whether that's good or wrong does not matter. It is how they interact there. Ethics is how humans interact with humans, irregardless of a social system. This is where you get to the right and wrong. Are you following along? Politics does not care about right and wrong. It is merely what is the most beneficial way to interact with humans in regard to a social system. Ethics are human interactions, human to human, irregardless of any social system. My voice is getting fucked. I think I'm sick. I think I'm developing yet another cold because my fucking manager gave it to me. He shows up. I'm not gonna bitch about my manager tonight. Just below ethics, we have epistemology. How do we perceive the world? Right? But I get you. Fucking epistemology is how do we perceive the world? How do we know things? Right? I feel like I'm forgetting one. Epistemology. I feel like I'm forgetting one. Hang on. Fuck. Hang on. I might not be, but I feel like I am. I think somebody used a different word for it, and it's getting me fucked up. Fuck off, Pizza Hut. I don't give a shit. Hang on. Let me look up. Let me find the chart again. Yes, okay, no, I got it right. Yep, somebody used a different word for it and that fucked me up. No, I got it right. It is, next is epistemology, which epistemology is how we perceive things, right? Now, this is like through, there are many different ways, some people say through spirituality, through understanding. A lot of the Greeks, Plato introduced the idea of education, which doesn't actually mean to learn something, it means to remember something, which that goes into Plato's philosophy of nothing new is learned. We're going to talk about that whenever we get to the metaphysics, alright? But the metaphysics is, how does the world work, right? How does the universe work? Yeah, Blaze told me the writer was a commie, but it even calls out communism. Kanye calls out all systems, and is just a... Really? Okay, sure. Also, the whole thing about Carlos Zen being a commie is that Carlos Zen said one time, like, fucking almost a decade ago now. Well, he said multiple times, but almost a decade ago now, which, goddamn, I feel old. But he said that communism will be the final form of humanity. He basically said that, like, at the end, whenever, like, everything is done, like, humanity will only have communism. But look at everything else he said about communism, and you realize that he is very, extremely hypercritical of communists. Anyways. So, metaphysics is how the universe works, right? To order it in the actual pyramid from the bottom to the top, the most important that should inform all philosophy going up, you have metaphysics. How does the universe work? Is there a god, right? Is there a god as part of metaphysics, by the way? A weed unchecked will overspread its bounds after all. Yeah, but he said, is there a god, how does the universe work, it goes down to quarks and atoms, molecules, all that. That's metaphysics, right? Are there spirits? Is there another world? That kind of shit, like a spiritual world. Plato believed that there's a spiritual world in which all perfect things retain their perfect form. I don't want to have to explain forms and all that shit, right? I don't have to explain it because that'd take way too long. But anyways, then you have epistemology, where how do we understand the world? Plato believed that there was that we understand the world, we perceive the world and understand and comprehend it through a skewed, mirrored version of what the perfect world was, which is why he said education is not learning, it is remembering. Because before we came into this world, whenever we're in the perfect world, we knew everything. So now we just need to remember it. That's where education comes from. It's the Greek word of to remember, right? Then the fucking then comes ethics, which is how humans interact with one another. Right? Metaphysics encompasses consciousness and spirituality, basically. No, consciousness is, kind of in metaphysics, but consciousness is also more of an epistemological thing, because that also comes down to how do we perceive the world. Is consciousness a way to perceive the world, or is it a meaningless byproduct? Trying to understand things that can't be truly measured. No. Metaphysics is entirely about understanding things about the universe. Saying it can't be understood is a Platonic way. Okay. Because we live, in Plato's mind, because we live in a messed up, fucked up dark mirror version of that perfect world where everything is off and bad and terrible, this is the Platonic version, is that everything is dark and bad in this world because it's not what it was in the perfect world. The perfect world had, there was nothing wrong with it. It had the best forms of everything, right? And everything else here is like a cheap imitation or a dark mirror of what was in that perfect world. A lesser form of it, right? So he says, we can't understand because we're not in that perfect world. That's a Platonic idea of not knowing about metaphysics because we don't understand it. That comes to epistemology, which, again, Plato was putting his epistemology before his metaphysics, which doesn't work. You need to explain how the world works and then say, how do we know it? But instead, he uses epistemology of, this is how we know about it before he even talks about how it is. That's bad philosophy. And to go along with it, Aristotle was the other half of the political world in Western philosophy, where Aristotle put metaphysics before fucking epistemology, and he said we have one world. He said we have one world. There is no higher plane. There could be gods, there could be spirits. However, he even said there must be a god, right? He was a religious person, but he said there's one world. It makes no sense that there should be another world, because why do I love this world so much? Why do so many of us fear dying? Why do so many of us fear dying if there's some better world out there? And this is actually where you get into, pretty much every fucking philosopher in the Western world afterwards is either a Platonist or an Aristotelian. Where a Platonist will say there's another higher world or a higher ideal that only some of us will be able to reach. And they practice a very warped philosophy, and Aristotelians, who, although they are constantly misunderstood and are seen as either nihilistic or pessimistic, the Aristotelians will say there is one world with potential spirituality. And how do we know that there's one world? The Aristotelian epistemology is reason. We understand this metaphysical world. We understand the metaphysics of the world through reason. If our senses can't be trusted, if our eyes can be lied to, if our tongues can, no longer taste, if we can hear warped sounds or go deaf, we understand what's going on because humans still have reason. That is the Aristotelian epistemology, where Plato's epistemology is because I said so. Aristotle's epistemology is because we can think about it, comprehend. This is the big divide. Here's the second thing about that Plato got wrong. Plato ended up spending a bit of time in Magna Graecia in southern Italy, whenever it was called Magna Graecia at the time. He spent a little bit of time with a little group called the Orphic Death Cult. Now, chat, I have a question. Do you sound like it is conducive to proper mental health or good mental health if you spend time with a death cult? Do you feel like your personal outlook on life and how you understand things, how you're thinking about things, will do too good if you're spending time with some people that worship the concept of death? Yeah. Plato got a lot wrong. The first downfall was him spending time with a bunch of people that were, kind of worshiping the concept of death and had this idea of rebirth. Thinking that, hey, life sucks, so let's just all kill ourselves and then be reborn into a better life. Not really conducive to good mental health. They weren't a suicide cult, like a suicide pact, but they did worship the concept of death. Not a very good place to be. So he spent some time with them, and he learned a lot from them. One of the biggest things he learned is from one of their original founders, a man by the name of Pythagoras. Now, yes, that is the same Pythagoras that we get the Pythagorean theorem. Also, the same Pythagoras that helped in the invention of music theory. If any of you make music, thank a guy that started not only a death cult, but also a lot of mathematics. Now, what did Pythagoras believe? He didn't really believe in all the death cult stuff. He still was an Orphic, but he had this crazy idea of what this higher world, the world of the gods that he believed in, what it was made of. Numbers. He believed that the world that we live in right now is a reflection of the higher world, the world that we live in right now is reflection on water, and the world around it that's being reflected onto the water is made of numbers. This was a very long-winded explanation to describe how the magic system in the Saga of Town of Evil works. It is following a Pythagorean view of the world, where the world is based on numbers, and how magic works is by computing those numbers and altering them. Does this make sense to you? I hope it does. I don't have to make an entire video describing this all. Incredible tangent. But do you understand, right? Basically, the entire world is, also, do you understand why this philosophy is wrong? Thinking the higher world is based on numbers. The idea isn't really dead, but it gets into some real fucking esoteric bullshit. Kinda. Where, okay, people will say, oh yeah, this world is just a series of math problems, which is kind of correct. However, Pythagoras was saying, the ideal world, the world that we should strive to get to, is made of numbers. Yes, that motherfucker tried to quantify happiness itself through equations. Do you see how this can lead how this can go wrong, how this can go badly? Do you understand, why Pythagoras, who influenced Plato influences the worst dictatorships known to mankind? fascism, communism, Nazism, they were all Platonic. I haven't gotten into Plato's ethics because that's a whole different debate. That's an hour-long tangent at least, and we're running out of time here. We should probably get a fucking move on it. Anyways, but do you understand how this goes wrong? But this is the world that Tanya lives in. Oh, by the way, Tanya is in fact an Aristotelian. She's an Aristotelian forced to live in an objectively Pythagorean world. God help her. Businessman is also an Aristotelian because he believes in logic and reason above all. Even in the face of God himself, he denies God and says that reason is all that matters. All, blah, 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 Aristotle himself, was a believer in the gods. However, he also believed in reason above all, even if he said, I think there's a quote that Aristotle said, even if I met, Zeus himself, I would still choose to follow my reason. Which is why Aristotle was moderately disliked around his time. Anyway, we're not talking about Aristotle anymore, Tanya. Anyways, that's how fucking the magic system works. Now, the whole thing is that feeding mana into an orb, it is like what, processes the computing, right? Because it's basically a calculator. It's what the orbs are calculators that alter reality by changing the numbers around them. However, more mana that you put into it means stronger calculations and stronger spells, However, if the mana goes out of sync, then the numbers will go wrong. If you get a wrong equation, it has unintended effects on the world, such as Tanya's orb, going out of sync, the numbers start coming out wrong, and then Tanya explodes. Do you understand? This was all a very long-winded tangent to explain why it's so important that Tanya is using a 4-core fucking orb. Nobody else can use it because the cores can't go in sync. It's like having, whenever they're trying to get motors to have, more chambers, right? More pistons, right? You need to have them all going in sync. If one's out of sync, it can fuck the entire thing up, right? That's basically what the orb is. That's why it's so important that she can use it. Not only that, but the orb can have fixed mana, which is like basically a battery. It's storing mana like a battery. It has been deemed impossible for every other nation on, everyone else, literally everyone else except for Tanya. Tanya has a pretty regular amount of mana that she can use. However, she has to be channeling 4 fucking streams and keep them consistent. Yes, which is why it's so impressive that she does it. And keep them in sync. Which is why it's so impressive that she's able to do it. But also, having fixed mana, like a battery, right? To everyone else, it's done. No, it's impossible. Can't be done. Drums, guitar, bass, and vocals on Rock Band. Yeah. And, so Tanya can't do it, and she's about ready to give up, but Being X interferes and says, I'm going to make them more faithful by giving them a sacred relic. And he decides that Tanya's Millennium Type 95 orb will be the sacred relic, but it'll only work if she prays to God. Tanya has to pray to God, which is something that she hates, in order to activate her Type 95. Moving on, it works. Tanya wants to murder the head scientist because, as the book quotes, says, the difference between a mad scientist and a brilliant and a misunderstood genius is quite simple. If you can talk to somebody and have a civil conversation and feel like you can tolerate another conversation with them, they're a genius. A misunderstood genius. If you have the urge to put a bullet in their head, they're a mad scientist. That's a paraphrase, but a pretty good quote, if you can find it. Anyways, hang on. I am getting fucked up. My sciences are fucked. Anyways. So, Tanya leaves the instructor program, the research and development on the Type 95. However, she has to take it in a battle with her on the Rhine front, the Francois Republic, the French Republic, invades the Empire, while the Empire is putting all of its, the Empire moves, I don't want to get into the fucking big details. So anyways, I'm running out of time and my voice is giving out. We could probably talk more about it later. But the Empire moved its grand army, its like main army, up north to fight the Entente Alliance. However, the French invade. The Western army is being pushed back. The Grand Army has to reorganize down to the Western Front. And this is where Tanya goes in, and she shows off her ability with the Type 95 orb, completely annihilating an entire division of named mages, like ace mages, right? Also mess with her head when she uses it. That comes later. Tanya finds out that there is mental corruption involved with the use of the Type 95 orb while she's training her battalion, which we're going to take a rain check on the book club. My voice is giving out. Also, there's not many people here, so guess what? Episode 3.5 will be happening probably Saturday or Sunday. We'll figure it out. But I'm sorry, I'm dying. I need to go drink something hot and take a shower because I'm coming down with a cold again. Make her want to pray. Rubber band snapping back, yes. We'll talk about this again Saturday or Sunday. I'm dying. Damn, go recover. I'm sorry. I'm bad at this, but my voice is giving out and I feel like I'm going to fucking pass out. So, Saturday or Sunday, we're going to continue episode 3.5, volume 1, Saga Town of the Evil, light novel. Thank you all for reading and joining. Hopefully more people join on the weekend. Go vote for the next book in the Funny Book channel. Haha. We'll be starting that tomorrow once we find out what the book is going to be. And we will try and have it done by the end of January, maybe the 30th or 31st. Okay. We're going to call that here for now. Dude, your health takes prio. Well, I feel bad because I'm constantly having to change plans and shit, but I feel like I'm being worked to the fucking bone, mentally and physically. Either way, thank you all for watching and reading and supporting. Check back in the weekend for 3.5. I'm sorry.